Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, as we all know, Wuthering Waves is approaching its second anniversary, and alongside that anniversary, well, it's got a lot of news from a lot of competitors. You might know one that's actually having its release, well, within 24 hours of the anniversary patch for Wuthering Waves launching, and that game over there is called Neverness to Everness. And we've got this video over here by the Nigerian Perspective. Love his content, by the way. You should sub to him if you haven't already. And this video over here is called Why the Search for a Wuthering Waves Killer Feels Like a Futile Endeavor. And as you can see over here, you've got content like Endfield in the background, NTE as well with its protagonist, and of course, a game over here that's looking a little bit neat in the center, if you can't tell. That one's Genshin Impact. I'm just wondering, what is the take across the space, right, with all of these competitors lining up, knowing that so many of them have completely failed to deliver in pretty much every single way possible? And the one that we obviously want to focus on over here is the one that you're seeing in blue, Arknights Endfield. Just take a look at this Google Trends chart showing YouTube searches, YouTube engagement, YouTube views. Bro, what is this garbage, right? It is currently one of the most unpopular games in the space, likely due to the fact that Endfield is just a gigantic piece of dog shit. I've never seen a game rug pulled this badly. It literally looks like, remember, it's the blue line, it looks like a fucking crypto scam. That is what Endfield actually entails to most players. A fucking scam. A pile of shit. A complete failure. And naturally, it was a game that was trying to take a good bit of audience share, right? Away from Wuthering Waves, being an open world sort of like open world sort of experience, and we all know how that one turned out. Yeah, there's a reason why you don't see any content about it on YouTube and nobody wants to fucking watch it. Because it's a shit fucking game. This title over here, Why the Search for a Wuthering Waves Killer Feels Like a Futile Endeavor, it kind of makes sense when you see so many games that have failed. And so naturally, why don't we take a look at this one and see maybe what it's like for some of the upcoming franchises.
We're finally experiencing the new updates in Genshin Impact, and as you would expect, there's been a lot of conversation and controversy around everything happening in this update, everything we've been seeing, everything we've been experiencing so far. And even with all the good and all the bad things we've said about Genshin Impact, there is one thing nobody can really deny when it comes to everything we've experienced so far.
Am I on 1.5 or is this motherfucker talking at like fucking light speed? Holy shit.
Genshin Impact has come a long way as a video game, and by extension, it has pushed the entire gacha space forward. But things get really interesting when you take a step back. I mean, if you go back around 3 or 4 years, when we were constantly looking towards the future of gacha, you'd realize that with every new gacha game on the horizon, every new announcement, there was one phrase that kept coming up over and over again: the Genshin Killer. I mean,
that's true. And that's because when it came to Genshin Impact, when its release in 2020, it was a game that was good, right? Genshin Impact was a game that changed the space. Absolutely. It was a game that inspired a bunch of other releases. But the unfortunate part was that Genshin put the brakes on the pedals. Yes, it hit the brakes and was basically in full milking mode from the perspective of no quality of life, no real updates to the baseline systems that people were frustrated, that people were hating, and people were simply just looking for an alternative because they felt insulted by the behavior of the developers. That's pretty much indicative of why everyone was asking for an alternative to play. No competition at all. And you all remember, right? Things like artifact loadouts, things like being able to run domains any day of the week, things like being able to double claim without needing the condensed resin, all of that stuff, right? Things like the weapon banner being improved, right? Epitomized path. Remember when the game initially released and there was no epitomized path at all? You could infinitely lose on the weapon banner and never get the one you wanted. Then they made it so you had to lose pity twice to guarantee the weapon, and then finally they made it so that you only have to lose pity one time. We all remember the Staff of Homeless, right? That's the level of greed. That's the level of refusing to listen. That's the level of incompetence that was shown by Hoyoverse to the player base, and it didn't change until competition was out. Wuthering Waves literally saved Genshin's weapon banner, and that's the truth, right? That's the truth regarding it. The game saw so much quality of life, so much improvement, so many changes directly following WuWa's release.
As much as we enjoy Genshin Impact today, as much as we can clearly see how far the game has come, the truth is there was a time when people wanted something to challenge it. Not necessarily erase it completely, but to stand on the same level, to force Hoyoverse out of that untouchable position.
Because they were resting on their laurels. They did not give a fuck. They took all your feedback, they took all your issues with the game, and then wiped Dway's fucking gross ass cheeks with them. Because it didn't matter. They didn't have to listen. They knew you were gonna pay up anyways, piggy, because you didn't have anything else to fucking play.
For the few years though, when everybody got that wish answered, because Wuthering Waves entered the scene. A game that people immediately labeled as the Genshin killer. And realistically, in many ways, it did live up to that idea. I mean, obviously, a game as massive as Genshin Impact isn't something you just kill outright. But what Wuthering Waves did do was force change, real change. It shifted expectations.
Yeah, because it was embarrassing to have all of Genshin's outdated, archaic systems still there when Wuthering Waves basically had all of the systems that Genshin did, but just better. Just straight up better in virtually every single way. I don't know a single Wuthering Waves system that is like baseline 1, like stamina, like wave plates, banners, pity, all of that, constellation stores. I don't know anything that's worse.
It changed how players interact with Gacha as a whole. And
maybe the one thing that's worse is co-op. Yeah, maybe the one thing that's worse is co-op. Yeah, WuWa's co-op, they aborted that shit, bro. I still don't know why. That shit was fun as hell, but they just stopped adding co-op modes.
that is not something anyone can really deny. But things get even all the more interesting when you think about it right now. I mean, now more than ever, we find ourselves at a familiar crossroads, because right now, we have Wuthering Waves dominating the gacha space, winning awards, getting recognition, being talked about as one of the best, if not the single best gacha game right now. And with that reality, there's really one question we have to ask. If
it is also just winning awards overall, like, it's one of the most, like, highly played games on the PC, too. Genshin has a huge portion of its player base on mobile. That's a fact. A huge part of its revenue and a huge part of its player base, it's just the COVID kids, right? The COVID adults as well, that use Genshin Impact as a substitute for a therapist. And they've just kept using it ever since, instead of, I don't know, just moving on like normal people.
we once looked for a Genshin killer and found one in Wuthering Waves, can there be a Wuthering Waves killer? And if there can, what does that even look like? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. So if you're into this kind of content, make sure to like the video and let me know your thoughts. What would it actually take for a game to rival Wuthering Waves? What would it need to reach that level?
Hey, good video. Good video. Yeah, what does need to happen to rival WuWa? Because you've already seen so many games try and fail. Bro, we didn't even talk about it. We were looking at the Google Trends chart, but what's the one that's the second lowest? Zenless Zone 0. Oh, sorry, it is the lowest here. Let's look at the past month, right? Just to be able to take a look at the numbers, right? We all know AKE is a pile of dog shit, but guess what pile of dog shit number 2 is? Zenless Zone 0. Bro, this game hasn't had a filler patch in like 2 years. Sorry, the game hasn't had a filler patch in like a year, because they're so desperate to like actually have a patch or a unit that pops off. But this game, it's balancing so hard, nobody pulls anything except Void Hunters. The only units that get pulled in this game that make money are Void Hunters, because they power crept characters in like the 3rd month of the game, literally known as like one of the biggest jokes in Hoyoverse, because it has power creep worse than HSR. I don't even know how you managed to do that. You had like the blueprint for what not to do, and they did it within 4 months of the game launching.
Thoughts in the comments below, and of course, don't forget to subscribe. Make sure to subscribe on any of my future videos. Alright, let's get into it. And now, if I'm being honest, becoming the Wuthering Waves killer, a gacha game capable of reaching the same heights Wuthering Waves has reached right now, might be one of the hardest things any gacha game can try to do. And don't get me wrong, this is not because Wuthering Waves is this flawless, untouchable game, or because it's doing something completely unheard of. No, the reason goes deeper than that. It's less about Wuthering Waves purely as a game, even though that plays a role, and more about the direction it's taking as an entity within the gacha space. And I think the best way to explain this, and even more so, to show how this affects every other gacha game, and even future ones trying to become the next Wuthering Waves killer, is to go back to the very beginning, back to Wuthering Waves' release, and really break down the direction they took, piece by piece, the decisions that, as we can clearly see right now, led to the level of success they're sitting on today.
He's probably going to talk about the listening. He's probably going to talk about the quality of life. He's probably going to talk about the actual changes that the devs put in that players were asking for, that basically put pretty much every other gacha developer like in shame. And I think the biggest loser when it comes to Wuthering Waves listening, Kuro Games listening, without a doubt has been Endfield. Holy fuck. The, like, disparity, like, the polarization of seeing, like, the quality of life, the changes, the updates that WuWa was making from, like, 1.1 to 1.3 versus watching these Enfielders, these Enfield devs, these hyper grifters just fist themselves live on their streams talking about how they're not fucking doing anything. Bro, the worst gacha system, the worst weapon banner system, the worst events, the worst kits, the worst animations, they all belong to Endfield. And they have done nothing except just, like, fuck over old players. They've done nothing to, like, fix the gacha. They're putting out, like, 70 limited fucking pulls in a patch, bro. Like, they're literally putting out 70 limited pulls in 1.1 on a 120 pity banny or 120 pity banner that doesn't carry over. That basically means if you're free to play, just don't pull. Pull once every 2 updates. You don't get to engage with the gacha system at all because your pity expires. Bro, an archaic dog shit mechanic from literally like 2015 that they're refusing to change in the modern day and era, so people think the game is just a scam.
Even beyond just the direction itself, we also need to understand the impact of those decisions. How significant they were in changing what players now expect from a gacha game. So let's go back in time, back to May 23rd, 2024.
Let's see it.
Wuthering Waves officially released. A game the entire gacha space had been anticipating for the better part of 2 to 3 years, ever since we first saw that initial trailer. But at the same time, it was also a game that launched in a very rough state. I mean, people who started playing Wuthering Waves recently honestly would not understand just how bad it was back then. Because at launch, the only people who could play it at a somewhat comfortable level were those with really high-end systems.
My system wasn't that good on release, and I was playing it just fine. I'm gonna be real over here. I don't know how shitty people's computers were during launch. Bro, I was running this shit on like a 5700 XT. Like, I was running this shit on like an old Ryzen 5. A 3600 Ryzen 5 and like a 5700 XT. I'm gonna be honest. I feel like some people were doing like had some old fucking computers. Like, I feel like some people are using computers from like 2015 that could run Genshin because it was a 2020 shitty looking game. And they tried using that 2015 computer on a game released in 2024. I think Genshin players that were playing Genshin with their shitty old, like actually shitty old computers were trying to run a game that was, well, let's be honest here, 4 years after Genshin. That also looks like 20 times better.
Everyone else, it's ranged from being one of the buggiest experiences you could have in a gacha game to just being completely unplayable. But here's the interesting part. Despite all of that, Wuthering Waves still had 3 massive advantages working in its favor. The first is that even though the experience was buggy, they got the basics right from the start. I mean, if you compare the game right now to how it was at launch, yes, it is way more refined today. But even back then, that foundation was already there. Moving the rover, engaging in combat, going through events, fighting bosses, all of it felt good to do. Even with those bugs, the core gameplay was solid. And this is very important, especially if you already know my stance about how the basics of gameplay affects the success of a gacha game.
I mean, I still play 1.0 units. Yeah, I still play 1.0 limited units. They still feel good to use. Yeah, no, I'm gonna be honest. Gion's kit is still popping off, bro. His kit is still popping off in 2026.
Second advantage is that Wuthering Waves had a weapon, something that is fully leaned into, something that already existed within the gacha space. The player's desire to feel heard. And that right there had a massive
this is the listening part.
Impact, not just on Wuthering Waves, but on the entire gacha space. It changed expectations in a way that future gacha games now have to deal with. And now,
remember Endfield? Yeah, no, probably a good part of why Endfield is getting fucked right now analytically is because people are comparing it to Wuthering Waves, listening-wise, and they're just like, why are these devs such fucking dickheads?
I'll get into that a bit later. But the last advantage, the most important one in my opinion, is that despite all of its issues at launch, despite the bugs, the instability, everything wrong with that initial version, the one thing Wuthering Waves did not have was a fundamental flaw, and that distinction matters a lot. More so because this leads into an argument I always hear, especially when I talk about Arknights Endfield.
Well, I think the fundamental flaw was that the 1.0 story was like kind of buns. But then they immediately fixed that in 1.1. Like the 1.1 story was fantastic.
A game that...
Yeah, so it was like, it was fixed in a patch. You see anyone talking about Endfield's story? No, nobody. I haven't seen anyone talk about that shit.
A game that, if we give it the benefit of the doubt, could be a potential Wuthering Waves killer if it gets certain things right.
Wait, let me just play this again.
Leads into an argument I always hear, especially when I talk about Arknights Endfield. A game that, if we give it the benefit of the doubt, could be a potential Wuthering Waves killer if it gets certain things right.
Yeah.
And this is where that argument always comes in. Because people say, well, if we give Wuthering Waves time, 6 to 7 months to fix itself, then it's only fair that we give Arknights Endfield that same amount of time. And
no, Wuthering Waves fixed itself in 1.1. It did. It was a good game after 1.1. Endfield got worse. Endfield literally went down in popularity. Like, bro, let me show you when 1.1 released over here, right? We'll just remove all these other games real fast, right? Bro, this was the 1.1 dev livestream. People thought, oh, surely the game is saved. Then they realized, wow, these fucking lazy pieces of shit did nothing. Trash, garbage, awful, terrible. Then the 1.1 patch released, and it just keeps going down. The patch released, and it was so bad, it kept going down to the lowest levels in recorded history for the game in terms of YouTube views, engagement, all of that. Do we even have a live stream? Oh, you're right. It wasn't a live stream. They just uploaded a video because they knew people were going to be shitting on the game in the live stream chat. So they dodged that because they're pussies. Anyways, like I mentioned before, it launched and then just immediately went down to the lowest levels the game has ever seen. That was their 1.1 update. Dog shit 1.0 patch, complete garbage, drops down like crazy, hits a new low. New update, hits a new low right before the patch. New patch, and then hits a new low during the patch. What do you call this other than a complete fucking failure development-wise? What do you call this? Because I don't think that there's a single player who's not shilling or grifting the fuck out of the game that can say 1.1 was an improvement. Tell me one way 1.1 made the game better. Absolutely nothing. Abso-fucking-lutely nothing.
And on the surface, that sounds reasonable. But in reality, it comes down to...
Stop saying bullshit. Oh, okay. All right, hey, we got somebody over here. Hey, what did 1.1 do to make Endfield better? Your face. Oh, bro, this guy is like the human version of the Goo Goo Gaga meme. No wonder Endfield players were doing all this AI-generated shit, making the MC look like a 5-year-old baby, because that's the mentality that they actually have as a community. Because like I said before, I think only children could actually like the game in its current state. So yeah, Goo Goo Gaga. Well played.
So that's one simple idea, a fundamental flaw. Something so deeply tied to a game that it's almost impossible to see it being changed in any meaningful way. And
like the 120 pity with no carry forward. Like that fatal flaw at Endfield that the devs refuse to fix and probably will never fix because they're the greediest motherfuckers that the gacha space has ever seen. Actually greedier and actually worse than Hoyoverse.
Arknights Endfield, unlike Wuthering Waves at launch, does have one of those flaws. The gacha
my man
system. See, here's something I want us to understand. When we talk about issues in the game, one thing we have to do is separate temporary problems from permanent design decisions.
Yep.
Things like bugs, lack of quality of life, rough story directions.
Those are all temporary. You can fix those. Yep.
Problems, yes. But very importantly, these are problems that we can see get fixed.
Yep.
And the proof of that is in looking at literally every gacha game that has come before. Wuthering Waves, Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail. All games who have had one or multiple of these problems. And in all games, we have seen these problems get fixed. Bugs.
Genshin still has a lot of stuff to fix, but yeah, they have addressed at least some of these.
Can be patched, quality of life can be updated, story direction can shift as new regions release. These are things that evolve. But let me ask you this: when was the last time you saw a gacha system fundamentally change?
Genshin with its intertwined fate, or Genshin with its epitomized path, where it didn't have one, then it had one, then it got buffed. But fundamentally, the systems and the rules of it, I would count that, yeah. But the Genshin weapon banner prior to any of the changes was the most ridiculously retarded shit I think anyone's ever seen.
The last time a game reworked its core monetization, its 50-50 system, its formal structure, in a way that actually benefited players long term. And even if you can think of one or two examples, compared to the vast amounts of games in the entire gacha space, how many games have actually done that? And that is the difference, because once players recognize that the system is inherently restrictive or predatory, more so than the already restrictive and predatory systems that are already naturally within most gacha games, it doesn't matter how much the game improves around it, that feeling doesn't go away.
And it certainly doesn't help when you make the pity 120, it doesn't carry forward, and you get 70 pulls a patch. Don't believe me about the 70 pulls? I got you. Get ready for this, guys. Somebody's been tracking the income. And if you don't count expiring pulls, right, because, sorry, Endfield has expiring pulls too, it was 70.3 in the 1.1 update. What a fucking joke. What a shit show. What an absolute disaster when it's 120. And then if you don't get to 120, the next banner, when it resets, it all disappears. Incredible. Awesome. Amazing.
I believe that is exactly what led to that disconnect, that eventual drop-off with Arknights Endfield. And ultimately, the reason why players don't care to give that time that was given to Wuthering Waves. Okay, so now that we understand why it made more sense to wait for Wuthering Waves, it's also important to understand that Wuthering Waves did not stop at the advantages that it took at its release. Because going forward in the timeline, you'd realize that Wuthering Waves further expressed something more, something that became pivotal to the popularity that it sees today, and that is Ingenuity. Fast forward to January 2nd, 2025, and we get a brand new region in Wuthering Waves, Renacita. And the beauty of Renacita is that more than any other region in the game, this is where Wuthering Waves fully committed to its direction, where everything started to click in a way that pushed the game into a completely different conversation, into the gacha killer territory. And the first and arguably the most important thing it did was solidify the idea of devs listen, not just as a feature this time, but now an identity. I mean, whatever hype we have for future regions, for Lahairoi, for the new Federation, Ashinohara, anything else, the truth is, the standard for that hype was set right here in Renacita.
Very, very, very true. And I would dare say that Renacita still to this day is more popular than Lahairoi. I'm gonna be honest, and I've already said this a bunch of times, I don't think people like sci-fi that much. I'm just being real with you. I think sci-fi is like a little bit, it requires too much thinking, and like a little bit, it's like too scientific and like too nerdy for some people. You gotta understand, the majority of gacha players are fucking idiots. They're like so dumb, it's crazy. So it actually is a lot easier for people to understand, like swords and like magic. You don't need to understand magic, right? Magic is just there. Magic is magic. That's why it's called magic, because it just happens. It just exists. Magic is just way simpler for people than like actual scientific backing that goes into, you know, what's going on. In a similar vein, right? It's just people like banging swords against each other, right? Swords against shields, all of that is like way different than like plasma beams and shit like that, and laser pistols.
Was the region that defined expectations. This was where we saw systems like flights, a solid traversal system, something we had never really experienced in any other gacha game before. This is also where the story actually started to feel different, a shift away from what we were used to, into something with a new tone, a new setting, a new kind of experience that people could actually get invested in. But more than anything, this was—
I actually didn't. Flight was cool at first, but I don't miss it. I'm gonna be honest, I don't miss flying.
Where players understood, where it became clear that the developers weren't just listening, they were responding, and because of that, something changed. We started expecting more. We started believing that every new version would bring meaningful improvements, that if there was a problem, if there was something we didn't like, the best thing we could do was speak on it, because there was a real chance that it would actually be addressed. And even though this was good for the growth of Wuthering Waves, you'd realize that this direction that Wuthering Waves took sort of became a detriment for other gacha games.
Well, yeah, because it made 2.0 updates like ZZZ 2.0 look like the biggest piece of dog shit anyone's ever seen. Bro, it was simply just embarrassing for ZZZ on its anniversary to release Wi-Fi Peninsula, and like it just looked like the biggest fucking trash the entire space has ever seen. Let me show you the impact of how bad ZZZ's like anniversary version update was. Bro, it was legitimately the most embarrassing shit I think I've ever seen a game do. Arguably worse than anything Endfield has done. It's like they're both competing for last place. Endfield 1.1 versus like ZZZ 2.0. Dude, this is when 2.0 dropped, right? You can see over here. on the months preceding 2.0, the game was at like a stable, like 1,500 to like 2,000 viewers. Then ZZZ 2.0 drops here. They get an uptick, right? And then it falls to a cliff no one's ever seen. Because they fucked it up so bad. Within 3 months, the game hit a new all-time low. That just gets lower and lower and lower. That was the impact of ZZZ's anniversary. That was the impact of the new region. That was the impact of 2.0. When you compared it in any way at all to Wuthering Waves, it was a complete fucking embarrassment. And then people dropped the game like crazy. And that was the 2.0 effect of WuWa. It made all these other games literally look like shit.
Because right now, the idea of devs listening doesn't carry the same weight they used to. I mean, a year or two ago, that was a selling point. It was something rare, something that made a game stand out. But
now people point out when the devs don't listen. Because listening has kind of been established as a baseline because Wuthering Waves went mainstream. And so when you have a game now that does the opposite of listening, people point it out real fast and they don't want to fucking play it.
Now it is expected. Wuthering Waves didn't just execute that idea, it redefined it. It turned something that used to feel like a bonus into something players now demand by default. And you can see the effect of that shift across the entire gacha space.
Massive viewership drop in Endfield, massive viewership drop for ZZZ, and when it comes to a game like NTE, right? I hope they got their listening ready to go. I hope NTE's 1.1 is a lot better than Enfield's, or something likely very similar is going to happen to that game.
Clearest example being Genshin Impact, a game that was known for having some of the most stubborn, most hard-headed and complacent developers in the genre, and yet, in just the past 2 years since Wuthering Waves' release, it has shown more evolution than it did in the 4 years before that, and that is not a coincidence. And the reality right now is, for every other games moving forward, whether it's Silver Palace, Rewinding Cadence, or even something like Ananta, none of these games can rely on the devs listen angle to win people over. That same level of hype that Wuthering Waves received will never really come back. And believe it or not, it gets even worse for newer games, because this situation proves two things at the same time. Firstly, as said before, they cannot rely on listening to stand out anymore. But second, they also can't afford not to.
Imagine the selling point of putting in feedback because gacha games weren't doing that before doesn't work because now the feedback and putting it in is expected. That's rough. That's really rough, to be honest.
There's no gacha game coming out in the future that can take the old routes, the complacent routes, the kind of approach that Genshin Impact got away with in its early years, and expect to succeed the same way. That era is gone, because now listening is not a feature, it is a baseline.
And there's so much competition now. Let's be real here. Games like Rewinding Cadence, games like Silver Palace, games like NTE, they have, at a baseline, pretty similar combat systems that are a lot more dynamic than Genshin and very similar to WuWa. Right? And it's kind of just like now these games are more so directly competing with Wuthering Waves as opposed to Genshin. Because great, guess what? Like if you're trying to compete with Genshin, great. If you've made a game, it's probably already better at a baseline than Genshin's. Because Genshin's combat is the worst fucking thing I've ever seen, bro. Genshin systems are some of the worst I've ever fucking seen, bro.
Enter the space where players expect to be heard. They expect feedback to matter. So every new game is stuck in a position where doing less than that is completely unacceptable. But doing exactly that isn't enough anymore. Which means the only real option left is to do more. And whatever that more looks like, that's what's going to define the next game that actually has a chance to stand alongside Wuthering Waves.
And we'll just have to see if NTE is going to fit that bill, right? Because it is the closest one. It is the one on the market right now that's like, it's on deck. Endfield struck out. Bro, this game is so dead. Dude, this looks like DNA's fucking launch chart, bro. What is this? Bro, what is even going on here? This looks like Duet Night Abyss. AKE struck out. It's done. It's gone. Say goodbye. Viewership literally getting Thanos snapped every fucking month with how shit the game is. And then 1.2 did abso-fucking-lutely nothing to help it out. Bro, do you want to know what this game is hitting on the daily in terms of viewership? Oh my god! What is that? Bro, this thing is about to hit not quadruple digits, not triple digits, it's about to hit double digits. This game is about to hit double-digit viewers on the daily. It's gone. And now NTE is the one up on deck. And all the pressure's on, because you want to know when NTE is launching? Right next to WuWa's anniversary. And if it doesn't, wow, bro, people are just gonna go play Wuthering Waves. It's awful, but it's the truth.
Anyway, going forward in the Wuthering Waves journey, all the way to December 25th, 2025, we get Lahairoi. And yeah, Lahairoi brings everything you would expect from a brand new region, a new environments, new traversal systems, new characters. All of that is there and all of that is good. But here is the thing. As I said before, when it comes to quality of life, when it comes to gameplay, when it comes to that feeling of improvement, Renacita already set the standard. And even though Lahairoi is in many ways a better region than Renacita, what you'd realize going through Lahairoi is that it never quite hits the same. We've already experienced the level of satisfaction that it is giving us right now before. But even with all that, the devs still gave Lahairoi something that pushed it into a completely different level. Something that's made us put this region on the pedestal that it stands on today.
I'm gonna be honest, I kind of am not the biggest fan of Lahairoi. It's all right to me, but Lahairoi kind of feels like a stopgap to me in the journey. Yeah, I like something about it just makes me feel like I'm looking forward to whatever's gonna be coming up afterwards. I'm like low-key ready to go back to like China. The whole like high-tech stuff, like the neon green, all of that. Lahairoi to me is just a little bit too like noisy. It's a little bit too like bright in like ways that I don't like. It is like, yeah, I'm not like the biggest fan of it. Just from like an aesthetic appearance. And the part that I like more is like thinking about either the New Federation or like Ming Ting or like, I don't know, like just any of like those other places, because to me, having the blend of fantasy and tech is what makes WuWa stand out. I actually like Huang Long, by the way. Renacita was obviously 95% fantasy, 5% tech. Lahairoi is like the only fantasy stuff is like the fucking Bjarter Woods, bro. But it's like literally segmented or like segregated on the map. Like the fantasy part feels like an actual like just a sectioned off part of the map in Lahairoi. So it's kind of just like, eh.
That is the story. And I know I've mentioned story multiple times.
Japan, Ashinohara. I could do a little bit of Japan, yeah.
Already in multiple videos, but that just shows how important it actually is. Because in playing Lahairoi, one thing you'd come to realize is that more than everything it offers, the traversal, the environments, the scale, there is nothing that comes even close to the impact of the story within this region. I mean, right now, Wuthering Waves is dominating the gacha space simply because of the story, and by extension, bringing hype to everything else, whether it's the characters or the new regions, something that people are always eager to talk about. So with all that being said, what actually makes a Wuthering Waves killer? Well, what we've seen so far makes a few things very clear. A game doesn't need to launch perfectly. It's okay if there are bugs. It's okay if things aren't fully polished on day one. But what it cannot have is a fundamental flaw.
AKE has so many problems, it's insane. A lot of those problems can be fixed, but a lot of them simply aren't getting fixed. And of course, the gacha is always going to be the biggest one with its convoluted dog shit weapon system, its convoluted resource and currency system, and the fact that, again, the game fucks you so hard if you don't hit pity, it's unreal, so people just don't even want to pull. And in a sense, hey, if I'm directly disincentivized from pulling in a gacha, well, I'm probably not going to play it, right? And you can just see the numbers for yourself. Biggest piece of shit I think the space has ever seen in a while.
Flaw that makes players feel like no matter how much they complain, no matter how much they wait, it is never going to change. That is where people walk away.
Yep. And why do you think the game is getting Thanos snapped every month? Why do you think that after the 1.2 live stream, it immediately goes back down? The engagement, all of that, it just disappears. Bro, this is what it looks like when the patch is releasing today. The patch is releasing today in like 8 hours. And this is what the engagement looks like on YouTube. It's releasing today. Not very good, right? Not very good.
On top of that, a game cannot rely on the devs' listen approach anymore. Listening has become the baseline. Anything less than that is just unacceptable.
And it's a reason for people to quit the game now.
If listening is not enough, then what is? Well, until any other gacha game can prove otherwise, I believe it is ingenuity. The idea that the game has to feel familiar enough that you can pick it up and understand it easily, but different enough that it has its own identity. It needs to build on what already exists while adding something new that actually matters. And most importantly, it needs a phenomenal story. Because out of everything a gacha game can offer, I believe the story is what creates the most conversation. Put all of that together and you're looking at a game that could genuinely stand at the top, a real contender, a true gacha killer. But that is just my opinion. What do you think?
I think he's right. But I think when it comes to story, you can get away with not having the best one ever. But if your story is like obscenely bad, like Endfield, on top of it having all those issues as well, story can maybe save the game for a short period of time if the gameplay and all this other shit has a bunch of fucking problems. But if your story is bad on top of everything else being shit, yeah, you're gonna, well, you gotta look no further than this, guys. you've got a game where the gameplay, all of that, the systems, dog shit, and the story's fucking bad too, that's what you'll have. And it doesn't matter how many ads you buy. It doesn't matter how many CCs you sponsor. It doesn't matter how many people take the bag. The game will die anyways. That's just the truth. And that's the reality of Endfield. A lot of people took the bag when it came to silencing their own critiques about this game. A lot of people took it to say that things are good, even though they're objectively not. And the game's just dying anyways. It doesn't matter. And when this game over here, right? This game doesn't even give out the bag. People don't get the bag, but it's just shit, so it dies. Oh, and the story in this game is really fucking awful, too. These two, Zenless Zone Zero and Arknights Endfield, are like the standouts in the space for how to not manage a gacha game and how to not develop one. And basically are the blueprint moving forward for every single developer on what not to do in the first year of your release. And as long as these games exist and like their track record is shown, developers really have no excuse for fucking up their release because they know exactly what not to do moving forward. And of course, right, you've seen that they were fucking completely dog shit when it comes to being WuWa killers. They're not even in the conversation when it comes to competing with Genshin. Perish the thought. Last thing I need to add is awesome video by the Nigerian perspective over here. And I think what he's saying is abso-fucking-lutely correct when it comes to like the new expectations and all of that. Excited to see maybe an updated take from him as NTE releases, Silver Palace, Rewinding Cadence, all of those, right? Because it's clear that WuWa is going nowhere while a bunch of other games are, some of the ones out right now, they're going down a cliff. Let me know what you all thought. Peace out.